Hunger Games. They're to punish the districts. Those tributes don't have a choice.
Your role is to turn these children into spectacles, not survivors.
We're live! Smile. It's why we have teeth.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Tom, I'm actually going to start with you because fans of the Hunger Games series are very familiar, I think, with this book. But for folks that aren't, your character is probably the one that they most associate with the series. But they're going to go into it sort of the same way I did with your character, where they may have it familiar, but we're getting to see a completely different side of your character. So I'd love for you to tell us about the Cornelius Snow we see in this version of the Hunger Games.
Yeah, Coriolanus at this point in his life is still relatively innocent. He's not undergone the kind of transformation to become future president of Pan Am and future tyrant of Pan Am. He is, at this point in the story, still like a cousin slash brother to Tigress. He's a grandson to Grandmom. He's still got love in his heart. He's not lost hope yet. And for me, that was what was so interesting about playing him, is like getting to lift the lid and kind of look at him before he undergoes that transformation. I think that's what's exciting for the fans too, is getting to like see a character who they think they know and kind of have their expectations challenged a little bit.
Yeah, but we see glimpses.
Oh,
let's be real.
By the end, as the transformation happens throughout the film, by the end you see him, you see who he's going to be.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, seeing a different version of him, because I will say the most interesting character to brush up against that new version is the lady sitting to your left in Lucy Gray. And everything that I think she does to him in this movie echoes throughout the entire series. So, Rachel, I'd love for you to talk about Lucy and how she not only lives in a different version of Pan Am, but a different version of the Seam and District 12 and what she means to that community when we find her.
Okay, book fan with the Seam. I love it.
Getting there, girl.
I mean, I think this movie is so much focused on nature versus nurture, and you really get to see how the different perspectives of one's life shape who they're going to be. I think Tigress's character really puts it the best when she asks Coriolanus, "What if it was your name that they pulled? Wouldn't you want to know that someone still cared about you?" And how she defends Lucy Gray to Grandmam and says she's just a girl. She's not the people who were fighting in the war. And so getting to see her interactions with Coriolanus having such different upbringing than he did makes it such a dynamic relationship, and it kind of leaves you wondering at the end, are we ever really going to make it, or are we just too different? And seeing how echoes of her personality and who she is kind of haunt him for the rest of his life in Katniss Everdeen in the original trilogy. It's a really cool thing to get to play with.
You've already alluded to one of the biggest controversies among book fans, and since you've already called me out on my fandom, I will mention this. It's the idea of, like, did these two characters who are in this quasi-love story, did they love each other, or were they using each other? I want to start with where your vote is, and then also how did you play it? So, Tom, I'll start with you. Where do you vote?
That's so tricky. I keep getting asked this question, and it's a really good question because it kind of flummoxes me every time, because I don't think I have an answer for it. I think like what Suzanne Collins is really good at is asking the big questions but not necessarily providing an answer. She provides like characters and circumstances that kind of challenge the question and kind of lets you walk away with your own answer, I guess. But I guess
I'm not letting you cop out
no,
like that.
I knew you wouldn't. I'm trying my best to cop out. I guess, you know what? If I had to pick one, I would say they are in love for a short time, short but sweet time. But like, is it love of circumstance? Like, is it born out of circumstance and out of need for each other? And then the question is like, what even is love? Like, does love have to be just like this pure thing that comes out of nowhere, or is it out of circumstance, and is it out of like what one person needs from another? So yeah, I would say yes, but yeah.
How hard was it to do that balance? Like, did you guys have, okay, on this day I love you, on this day I hate you, on this day I'm not sure? How did you sort of keep the push and pull of the characters straight?
I don't know, for me, like, a lot of their kind of confusion with each other and their kind of, the challenge between them and the kind of, the crux of the imbalance of power that they're fighting is like the ambiguity of it. Like, I think Corio was looking at her thinking, I love her, but she feels dangerous to me. She feels like the very chaos that he's been taught you have to control in order to have a like flourishing society that he wants to live in. Like, she kind of represents the chaos and the kind of the fire and the, the music and the life, and he's been taught that you have to like squash all that in order to have control and be powerful.
And ironically, he represents a very similar thing for her because she views the capital as disorder, and you view the districts as disorder.
Yeah.
And I feel like when we were approaching our scenes together, it was mostly, for me at least, what percentage of her doubts what he's saying to her right now on this given day. Because she doesn't really know for a majority of it. The first thing that happens between the two of us is the guards say that you want to help me, but you also get money, so which is it?
And I say both.
Yeah. And there is like an unbridled honesty to a certain extent that makes you want to root for them. But the reality is that both of them are very much team self-preservation and survival.
So your team love butt.
I'm also team love butt.
Love butt. Team love butt.
You said that, not me. And the internet will have its day. Hunter, I will say the great thing about this version of Snow that we get is that he is humanized almost instantly. And I would say your character is doing so much heavy lifting. Let me just talk about it, because I did not go into both reading about this character and also watching them on screen thinking that. So I'd love for you to talk about, again, how she is her own person, very much in that, but she's always reminding him of humanity, and maybe as we watch her transformation, that's also when he loses that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, on a bigger level, I feel like the universe sometimes puts people in other people's lives, like, purely because they need them, you know? And I think that's probably how Tigress has felt for most of her life, and it's not even a question for her by the time we meet her in the movie. So I think it like when we meet her, it's only second nature for her to feel like, I think her core purpose is to you know, support and like and keep Corio like grounded in this like crazy world that they have to navigate. So yeah, I think it's like completely integral to like who she is as a person.
Also, I will add, there is obviously always with the Hunger Games, great sort of, I would say, moments of costuming and fashion and everything. And I will say, even for post-revolution, very sort of like rundown capital, it was nice to see that she was slaying some looks. But that also meant you got to talk to the costumers, I think, because for your character, what she's wearing is a huge part of the character and everything. I think for you, that was probably extra added fun as a fashion girly.
Absolutely. I mean, the way Tigress navigates fashion totally reminds me of how I used to, like, back when I lived in North Carolina, and, like, you know, we don't even have, like, Zara in North Carolina. So my way of, like, I don't know, making clothes and being able to participate in fashion was, like, going to the thrift store and then cutting things up and sewing them and whatever. And I think that's kind of exactly how Tigress comes at it too, you know, just with their lack of resources and dressing not only herself up but Corio up to play the game.
Yeah, playing the game. She helps him hide. She helps him navigate everything.
Oh, I love that. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Josh, I will say for your character, as much as like Tigress, she gives armor, your character gives not just humanity but ethics and morality, and that's something maybe that Lucy needs at certain points in the arena, and also all the other characters as well. But I will say, you already stepped onto some great sets. Both you and Rachel stepped onto Steven Spielberg's set for West Side Story. Has to be kind of awesome, though, to have scenes with Viola Davis and Peter Dinklage and, like, the other cast. Also, even, like, Josh and what he brings to the table. Talk about stepping onto a Hunger Games set, not only as a fan, but knowing you had this incredible cast with you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that comes with a healthy amount of imposter syndrome for a little while, you know, until you have time to sort of get comfortable. It was a colossal learning experience and a real masterclass to be able to, you know, act with these guys and also act with Viola, Peter, and Jason. I really spent a lot of time just trying to absorb the kind of professionalism and the, you know, caliber of performance that they brought to the table, and just do my best to kind of mimic that, I guess, to some degree. You know, it's really terrific. I've been very lucky.
Your character, again, for folks that are fans of the Hunger Games, they've definitely read him, but he's a newer character for folks in this one, more so even than Lucy, who's sort of referenced, I think, a little bit, or sort of like is a ghost of the games. Can you tell us a little bit about who he is and how he relates to everyone else here?
He's a man of heart. There's his heart on his sleeve. He's got really, really strong convictions. He's originally district and was able to come to the capital because his dad made a lot of money and became rich enough to move to the capital. And because of that, there's a fair amount of resentment that he has for his environment. And I think because of that, he's able to clock that Coriolanus is not the polished, wealthy sort of paragon that he tries to pretend to be. And there's kind of a relationship that gets built from that. And he just really believes in the good of humanity and people's capacity to do good, and in particular Coriolanus' capacity to do good and his potential to be a good person. And he faces adversity because of that, and there's a really beautiful amount of tension because of it. Adversity
is a very kind way of playing that, but I love you for making sure folks pay attention, because they're going to get to go through a lot with your character. I will bring it back to your character, Tom, because he sort of alludes to it, and that is the duplicity, and the duplicity that he has even with himself, I think, as a person, but also what he's doing to this. Because even in the story, we see him at two very different points. Both, I would say, like the hair tells the story a little bit.
It does, yeah.
But what was that like for you, sort of like embodying him through, I would say, a very different, not even a character arc, almost like a character divot?
Yeah, you know, the image that comes to mind is, I don't know if you ever read these books as a kid, but where you get to like choose your own path, and if you turn up to a certain page, you get to go down that path instead of the other one. I feel like watching Corio go through this movie is like watching him kind of at the most pivotal point of his choose your own path story, and he keeps kind of choosing the slightly more murky, more complicated path every time, which is the most interesting one and also the most like heartbreaking one. So for me, I mean, like getting to play that is always fascinating. You know, getting to play the kind of duality of a person, and I think like me as an actor as well as the audience are kind of rooting for him to, like, even though we know where he ends up, which is the amazing thing about this story that Suzanne has written, is like, you know where he ends up, and yet you can watch this and still be rooting for him to like make the right choice and do the right thing. And then when he may or may not, you know, you're kind of like heartbroken with Tigress and with Grandmom and with Lucy Gray.
I would imagine that. A lot of actors talk about how the more sinister sides are more fun to play. Did that also make the more tender, loving side more difficult to play, knowing that, let's be real, like when you're in your juices on that, it might be a little bit easier?
Yeah, if anything, actually, I think it was like a breath of fresh air. Like when I got to play like the love moments with Rachel, or like the really like heartfelt moments with Hunter and Tigress, like those days were just like, oh, thank God, I get to like breathe a breath of fresh air today, because the darker moments are, you know, towards the end it gets heavy. He gets kind of heavy, and especially that breaking point. So to get to play the lightness from time to time, and also just like be able to see why you might like him at the beginning, because it's hard to understand why you might like this guy when we know where he ends up. But I think that's the cool thing about the book in the first place, is like getting to kind of like remember the humanity of it all, and remember like that everyone starts off as like an innocent until they're not. Yeah, I find that interesting.
I feel everyone would be upset with me if I didn't mention the music of this one, because that has been such a big feature of both the trailers and everything. And I don't think the music intimidated you, but it is an added bonus in addition to the physical aspects of the performance and then everything you have to do to bring Lucy to life. What do you think, well, what was it for you? Was it refreshing? Was it an escape? Was it something where, like, which was more challenging? Adding on the music or maybe adding on all the physicality?
Definitely the action bits are so much more than I've ever had to do before. You know, other movies I've had stunts that I just simply wasn't allowed to do, move on. This one was 95% I did all my own stunts, and it was without much preparation and just a lot of care and a lot of patience from the people around me. So that definitely was the added pressure and a lot of intimidation for me, which made the music scenes feel like, okay, I've got this. A nice deep breath. This is like coming home. This is like second nature to me. And I always feel like when I'm on a set and I get to know my crew, I'm getting to know all of their talents so well that it feels really exciting to get to bring one of mine to the table. Because it's more than just getting to like say words on a screen. It's like getting to Stephen Sondheim once said that you sing when the emotion is too great for speaking. And it's really wonderful that Lucy Gray gets so many moments that are so emotional that she can't speak anymore and she has to sing.
All right, so what was the hardest action sequence then?
I mean, definitely like the bloodbath, the beginning of the games, because it was a lot of camera choreography, and God bless our crew, they were just pushing me out of the way to just make sure that I didn't die in the process.
Watching you run through that forest in those heels was pretty intense too.
All of it was in heels. That was really the thing. Trish
Because she's
Somerville
got to
said,
serve a look.
Trish Somerville said no flats and no zippers. Those were tied up every day.
Oh man, that's torturous. That needs to be on the tagline, like and in heels, like very Ginger Roger in that.
Yeah.
The other thing I loved is that when I was researching this, all of you at one point are screaming, "I was such a big Hunger Games fan. I ran through the book," or "I was obsessed with this." That means that the call, I don't know when in the audition process, even maybe when they even say they're interested in you, had to be like a freak out moment. So I would like all of you to maybe sort of let me know on your freak out moment, either when they said they were interested in you, or better yet, probably when you got the part. And I'll start with you, Rachel.
I hung up on my agent. I hung up on him. He said Francis Lawrence said you're his #1 choice for Lucy Gray, and I hung up the phone. I panicked. I don't really know.
Didn't call back for 3 months.
Hopefully he took that the right way.
It was amazing, and because I had kind of bothered one of my other agents after I read the book in 2020, saying I want to do this. What are they doing? And she was like, Lionsgate has optioned it. Francis is attached to direct, but it's the pandemic. Nobody's moving on anything. I said that makes sense, and then in 2022 I got the phone call, and it was really amazing. So that's mine. What about you?
I go speechless whenever I get like big news. I really do like lose words. And I definitely, like, all my agents called me up and they're like four or five people on the phone, and first of all, 4 or 5 people on the phone is a nightmare, like waiting to see who's going to speak when, and I'm like, so I just go silent, and then I think they wonder if I've hung up. But no, I'm just sat there like going, so yeah, that was my experience. It's literally speechless.
Speechless. And then you have to keep it a secret because then.
And then you got to keep it a secret, and like you can't tell your family, or when you do tell your family, like you have to promise not to say anything.
I'll know it was you.
I know it was you. Yeah. I'll come for you.
The threats come out.
Yeah. Well, started channeling Choreo straight away.
I love it.
I was like, don't cross me.
Hunter, what about you?
I feel like when good things happen, they don't actually register in my head that it's a thing that's happening until I'm there. So I don't think I really had my freak out moment until I was like, I don't know, how did we start? I think until like I was on the set, and by the way, everything's like practical, like there's literally almost no green screen, so it really just felt like I was like, I'm in panic. And I think that was the moment for me.
I want a t-shirt that says, bitch, I'm in panic.
Seriously,
that's really good.
make the hashtag, let's go. Josh,
I have the tendency to be kind of a cynic, I feel like. So when I got the audition request, I was like, well, I'm not going to get this. So I did it. I did the tape. I was in a rush, and I told somebody else, this is really bad, but I had the iPad here under the camera, and when I would look at the line, I would pretend that I was thinking.
He's just a really good actor, okay?
I can't believe you're sharing this.
Yeah, I would not be sharing this, Joshua.
Stop it! Keep going.
Hey, listen, but I did the research before I did that, but I didn't learn the line completely. But then I got a call back. So then it started to get a little bit more real, and I was like, oh gosh, I got to really work on this. I did the call back, and I knew the lines.
I was just about to say, but then at that point, aren't you like, well, it worked the first time, so now I've got to never learn lines again?
No, because then, unfortunately, what happens is I do this like blasé thing, and I think it becomes really honest because I do that, and then when I want it, it's like, oh my gosh, and then I get really nervous. But then I got the call back, and I was able to, I guess do it. I still, even then though, I was quite skeptical. But then I got the call, and I was kind of like, what? No. And it wasn't really until I was on my way to Berlin that I was like, I think I'm doing this movie.
Yeah. It wasn't until they announced you that you were like, I got it.
I can't take it back now.
Yeah, exactly. They already posted on socials. They can't take it back.
That's a more real actor thing, because like we know things sometimes, especially go away.
You can lose it at the last minute. Yeah.
I'm gonna just call y'all Hunger Games super fans. You could lie. I could be lying about you, but that's where I'm leaving it.
I think we are.
Okay, good time. Then you know that a lot of folks are like, we love this as it is, and like, so for those folks, I'd love for you all to maybe sort of give. I'll start with you, Rachel, because I think you've got the tagline for like, this is why you need to come to this one, because I think they're gonna see a lot of different things in a world that they probably think they already know, even if they did read the book.
Right. I think as a fan of something, getting the backstories about stuff is always so interesting, and so much of the heart of the fandom are the diehard fans, and the reason we make these films and the reason we've been able to come back and make this prequel. They're going to get the games that they know and love, but they're going to get the why, which is really, really interesting, because I feel like in the original trilogy, you get to examine so much of the world of Panem, but never its history. So I really think that's reason enough to come, and you don't only get the really interesting backstory of a villain, but you get the background of the rebellion and the revolution. And I think it's such a compelling story about so many different facets, and I really think fans are going to have such a wonderful time, and newcomers to the series are going to want to go and rewatch the original trilogy after.
And y'all are kind of dreamy. Like, I'm like watching y'all on the interview, and I'm like, I see it. I'm like, y'all are kind of dreamy in those moments. I'm gonna put that out there for the romance book reader-ish people. I'm gonna put that out there. I'm like, there's some dreamy moments too. I will say that in between all the carnage.
Right.
Tom, I'll put it down for you on this last one, because again, this is in a lot of ways a prequel of President Snow that we eventually get to see. But I know you didn't want it to be what Donald Sutherland did in the trilogy. You wanted to make it your own. But I'm sure there was very key things that Francis said to you he wanted to make sure stayed true. Can you maybe communicate what those sort of like core things were, to where we could maybe see, yes, a different version of this character, but know that it's going to end up where it ends up at the end?
Yeah, it's interesting, because actually it was the opposite. Francis wanted me to stay away from like trying to do anything that Donald did.
Oh, wow.
He like was really adamant that he wanted it to be a totally fresh take, and that we had kind of like 64 years of license, like creative license, to kind of make it our own. But I, as a fan of like this book and also the original films, I was like, how can you watch this and not like want to see some of those mannerisms in there? Or like just that he's got like such a specific way of like speaking, his cadence and his rhythms, which make that performance so like delicious. And I was like, but I would want to see that. If I was watching this film, I would want to see that. So I was like, how do I put that in? And then I realized it's like, oh, you can get there as the film goes on. Like he ends in a very different place to where he begins. So I gave myself kind of the freedom at the beginning to make him just a young man who is ambitious and hungry and like wanting to do right by his family and whatever that meant to me and like where that lived in my body. And then by Act 3 of this film, he's very much on his way, and that's when you start to see like President Snow coming in a little bit, and like just the way he speaks, the way he holds himself. And I definitely took a little bit of inspiration from the original President Snow for that, because I don't know, he's just like that one step closer to being President Snow, the tyrant. He's still got a long way to go. He's still got like 63 and a half years. But like you want to see him kind of on the way by the end. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to ask a risk one, because I know we don't have any other source material, and everybody is going to trust in what Suzanne Collins has done at this point. But some people would like to know if you guys hope this could be the start of something more. Because, I mean, there's like 65 years in between. There's a lot that they could do. Do you want to do it? Look at Hunter like, yes.
Like, yeah, I think we'd all love to. And I think we all agree it would have to come from Suzanne and Francis and Nina. But we would love to come back.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot more to discover with this. Yeah.
This is an easy crowd to be like,
as long as I don't have to learn any lines, I'm fine.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. Thank y'all so much. I really appreciate it, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
All right, dope.